All right, so let's start with today's topic. So this is network automation day 3. Now in this day 3, right, today we'll be talking about two important things. One is the REST and second would be the JSON. Now we have been talking about these REST APIs and JSON since long. Almost for 2 days we were talking about that how they are so useful. Now though even if you have never programmed, but still by the end of today's session you will be able to actually understand that how all these scripts they work, how these languages they work. So we'll pick up from the point where we left the API, application program interface, and we know that this is something which is communicating between program 1 and program 2. Now we dive a bit deeper. Actually what they are doing, they are just sending some variables. They are sending these variables from program 1 to program 2. Variables and the data structure, right? They are sending from one program to another. Now what this second program would do, this second program will use these variables and then it would manipulate them, it will process them, and then will come up with some more variables, right? It can create some new more variables. So the point is that every program would be manipulating these as per their need. Now this is so important that what happens, that let's say we keep on creating several APIs, API 1, API 2, API 3, and every API it is helping for some specific function. So they are like pre-built APIs, and every API is for specific function. Now because it is for specific function, this means that we don't have to recreate the whole thing right from the scratch. This is like ready to cook recipes, ready to cook food. So it is like that upma packet, right? You straight away put it into water, hot water, and upma is ready. We actually don't have to do everything from scratch. So this is the big advantage. And in this, several types of APIs they exist. There are several types of these APIs they exist. So as such, if you see, this is a very big advantage for those who are actually into programming, right? So they don't have to really struggle for creating everything from scratch. Now we shall be focused today on REST API. REST, that is representational state transfer, right? This is representational state transfer, and that's why REST or the REST. Okay, now first let's see that what exactly will they be doing. Now here if you see this REST API, they are also called as the, like say, REST based API, or they are also called like RESTful API. So this all means the same. He was the person called Roy Fielding. He was the person who came up with the concept of REST based API or RESTful API. Now we'll really appreciate this thing if we understand that how these REST based APIs they actually work. Now see, let's make it very simple. There are about 6 attributes, right? 6 characteristics which are making it very specific. So first is that all these are client server based model, stateless operation. We'll go into the details of every point. We are just writing down first that what are they. Then cacheable, or it is uncacheable. This is clearly defined into every RESTful API. Then uniform interface. This is self-explanatory, that interface itself is so easy and it stays same for the entire duration of that API, right? It is a layered structure. And finally, you can really code on demand. That means it is expandable. You can keep on adding the codes as per needed. But these first three parts, they are extremely important because they actually tell us how this thing actually works, right? So let's talk about these first 3 points in more detail. The first thing first, the thing what is called as the client server architecture. That means we are talking about this RESTful API. They are following what's called as the client server architecture, right? Now in this client server architecture, say if we say client server, so there has to be a server and there has to be a client, right? And because we are talking about REST, so that's why we say that this would be the REST server and this would be the REST client. The normal concept, it always stays good, that it is the the client who will be demanding something and it is the server who will be supplying. So server is one who serves. So over here it would be serving those variables. It would be serving that data. So let's say this API, right? There is API and it is called as the call. When we say call, that means it is asking for something. So that's our first step, right? It is asking for something. And this is like HTTP, TCP, IP, right? All those headers. So this is the first point where it is asking something. But in this HTTP, there are something what is called as the verb and URI. We'll talk about these in detail in just a moment. But at this point of time, we just understand that it is asking for something and it comes to server, that yes, I need some information, and server is then supplying that piece of information. They are communicating via APIs. So over here also there is API, right? So this is like a written code and data, right? So that is what server has given. So that's the reason it is called as client-server architecture. So this was the first point. The second point was the stateless operation, right? Stateless operation. Now you'll come across this stateful and stateless operation at many of the places. Now to understand it, we simply see that how, forget about say this REST API for a while. Think of the difference between TCP and UDP. When we talk about TCP, we say that one of the difference was that let's say there is a large file. It is safe to send on TCP. Why? Because if it is a large file, so obviously it would be fragmented. No problem. Even if it is fragmented, even if all the fragments they are reaching to the destination in any of the order, but nothing to worry, because there is a sequence number. Right, for every fragment. That means at the destination they will be rearranging themselves. Once they will rearrange, your entire file is ready and happy to go. This means that every piece of information was having some relation with the past piece or the past fragment, right? So over here, this means that this thing is what's called as the stateful. So when we talk about stateful, it means there is some past association, right? That's what is called as the stateful. Now when we talk about stateless, this is like UDP. We say that it is like a postcard, whether it has reached or not, no trace. So same way over here, when we say UDP, so UDP is stateless. Whatever is getting sent is sent, fine, whether it reaches, whether it not, that's entirely a different thing. But the point is, there is no correlation with the past. So no past history is considered. So over here, in case of stateless operation, this REST is also something in which there is no past history considered, right? So that's the second point which we wanted to talk about, that this is the speciality of REST API. The third thing, that it has been marked very clearly whether this is cacheable or it is uncacheable. Again, to understand this thing, let's talk about a web browser. Now, truly speaking, this web browser is nothing but a blank screen, right? It is like we go to a specific server, we say that yes, I want that page, and server would be feeding that page to us, and that's what we see it on our screen. Now let's say we open one specific website, and there we have got a logo. At one of the corner. We refresh the page, we go to second page, we go to third page, but this logo is constant. So what really happens is that when we are demanding a specific web page, right, when there is a specific web page, some of the images, they are present, they are like fixed. Rest of the content is changing, but this logo or some specific images, they are fixed. So what it does is, it would say that there is no logic in downloading these images again and again. So these images, they are declared as cached. So over here, once the things are declared properly as cached, so there is no need to download it. And same thing happens even in case of, say, REST based APIs. Over here also it is marked very clearly whether it is cacheable or not, right? So it also marks clearly regarding this. Okay, now what we do is we are going into, say, programming basics. Now, even if you have never programmed, still you'll be able to understand nuts and bolts of this entire programming. If you are into programming, so then you'll find this thing extremely easy. But it's like, say, normally when we are handling those routers and switches, usually we don't come across programming very much. So the purpose over here is that when we'll be dealing with this programming basics, it will actually make our understanding so good when we'll really be watching. And trust me, at the end of, say, today's session, I'll be writing a small script and you'll be able to say, yes, this is what, why this is object, why this is a pair, etc. Okay, so from the programming basics, we start with the simplest of the simplest thing, and that's what is called as the simple variable. Simple variable is like, it could be a name, or you can say it can be a label, anything, and all it has been done is it is assigned a value. It is assigned some value. So let's see an example. It's like if I say that A is equal to, say, 5, B is equal to, say, -10, right? C is equal to, let's say, 3.157, right? And then we say, let's say, like heading, say, equal to, and then we say the product is, right? And then finally we say print heading A into B. Now in all these cases, say what this is unsigned integer. This is unsigned integer. This is signed integer. Over here, this is like a floating point, right? This is like a full floating point. Number, floating point number, and this is text. So these are like, the point is, these are like simple variables, just one value, whatever the name we say, but basically they are like just simple variables. Okay, the next one, we see the concept of that what is list and what is dictionary variables, because see, this is dictionary variables. Simple variables, it was for understanding. Now we don't just use one simple variable or two simple variables, right? Because we are handling some complex data, so we need to go into more complex variables so that we can handle complex data. And when that data is complex, obviously its structure would be complex, and if structure is complex, so then we'll be requiring some set of variables, right? Some set of variables, some set of values which will be requiring. So this is our keyword, a set. Okay. Now say for example Python. This is a language which is very well in demand in today's world. So what it does, it uses list variables. List variables. When we say list, think of that if you have got say gig 0 by 0, gig 0 by 1 and gig 0 by 2, and if I say that all these ports currently they are administratively down, they are shut, you have to open these ports. But at the most what I can allow, and let's say we are into config mode, right? We are into config mode. And in config mode, say I can give you only two statements to write, only two statements, and then both of all these three ports, they should be up. Now if you write say interface gig 0 by 0 and then you say no shut, finish, your turn is over. So what would you do? You'll do interface range command, correct? You'll use interface range, and then you'll say gig 0 by 0 space 0 by 2, so from 0 0 to 0 2 all the ports, and then you say no shut, and it would work. So actually what you have done is you have used a list command. When you say a range, it is as good as using a list command. So over here things would be a bit different. Let's say you have to define, you have to give some name to that list. So you can say it like say list 1, right? And then you have to define that who will be the members of that list, and something which you can do it like gig 0 0 comma and then gig 0 by 1 and gig 0 by 2, that way. So this is what is called as the list. In Java, if you see, so this thing is called as the array. So it is just a matter of what you call it. But in Python over here it is called as list, and in Java it is called as array or the arrangement. Now there is another type. There is one more type. It is called as the dictionary. It is called as the dictionary. Now in dictionary, say as such, if you open dictionary, so in dictionary there is some word, and then there are some associated words, right? There is like something like synonyms. So there are some associated words that also we see, right? So it means it is a combination. It's a combination. You don't get just one word, you get something extra also. So over here it's like, let's say we create one more variable, like say dictionary 1, right? Any name can be given, but we are giving this name for our understanding. And in this, what we are doing is we are telling that this is like say config speed, config dash speed, and then this is colon, and we say auto. So normally in config mode, when we give this speed auto, that means both the ports on both the sides, they will try to negotiate for the best possible speed. If both are on 100 Mbps, it will take 100. But if one is on 100 and another one on gig, so lower the better, right? It will always try to go for the lowest one, and it will go for the opposite side, though it is on gig ether, but it will communicate at 100 Mbps. Okay, so over here, once again, we write it like, say, config dash, say, duplex, whether it is half duplex or full duplex. Once again, we are putting it over here, auto, so it will decide accordingly, right? Over here, we take one more example. Say this is like config dash IP, right? Config dash IP colon, and then we give some, say, let's say 192.168, say 10.1, and we close this thing. Now if you see over here, we were using two things. There was a key. This is what is called as the key, and this is what is called as the value. So in case of dictionary, there will be a group of key and value. So that's how the dictionary settings will be there. So here we learned list and we learned about the dictionary, and I just write one word, one sentence, that data structure in reality, it is nested, right? It is nested. We will see one very good example at the end of the session. But when we say nested, means that there can be one type of variable, and in that there is another variable defined. We'll talk about this in more detail, right? But right now, if you see, we talked about simple variables, right? We talked about those simple variables, then we talked about list, and we talked about dictionary variables. I think this much is sufficient to understand that how all these lists they operate, right? Because they are designed in such a way that no very high end on programming language is actually needed. They said that you focus on the network administration. Okay, one more concept we take. Now coming back to our REST API, and we know that it is running between, so that one program is talking to a second program. Now there can be two possibilities. One possibility is that this is running on one computer. When it is running on one computer, then it is quite easy because it is running on the same operating system. So this is fine. There is no need to leave that computer. Everything is getting processed over there only. Same operating system. But when they are running on different computers, so we need to add something extra to that. That our APIs, they should be able to handle the networking protocol also, right? So it is this networking protocol which is to be added, which is to be defined. And obviously the simplest of the program which is used for this purpose is HTML. The reason behind that why HTML is used, because the logic and the principles, they really match. means between REST and the HTML. So they both really match, and due to this, say HTML is in use. So even in HTML, say you will be having say stateful, stateless, and say there is cacheable or not non-cacheable. Those things are clearly defined. All right. Now say in software industry, whenever we talk about say software industry, they work on C R U D. This is so popular. C is create. So over here, instances of variables they are created, right? So in other words, in simple words, variables and data structure that's created. R is for read. So whatever has been created, so we read values, right? Read values of these variables, and from where will we read? Obviously from server, right? So server would be giving us those values. Update means if given writes, so then we change the value. And delete is obviously delete, right? We remove that instance, right? Removal of that instance. So this is in a very simple words, 4 things which really explains that how any of these programming systems they work. So that's how it goes. But when we said that here on one side, if I put like say this CRUD, right, and over here I put say REST API, and in fact it works in association with HTML. So when we say over here say create, so then over here it's called as the post. When we say read over here, so there it is get. When we want to update, so over here it is put or say patch, and delete is delete is delete. Now if you remember, we talked about that there is something what is called as the URI, right? There is something what is called as the URI. This we saw when we were say, where is it? Yeah, here it is, right here. We said that we'll be talking about this thingy in length. This is very important concept, because there is like URI, there is like URL, right? So many things. So let's talk about, and in fact let's remove all the confusions about this URI, and say even we can talk about all of those. Say URI, this is uniform resource identifier. Uniform resource identifier. Now see, in URI, two things are there. It is identifier, so it's like we can identify some person by his name, and we can identify him by his address. Now this thing is making sense. Actually, whenever we are identifying any of the node, so then we are identifying that node with two things, two types of addresses. Name, something which never changes, right? So that was like our MAC address, and this address, this is like IP address. So this gives us the combination of the most unique machine in the world. And why address? Because this IP address is really telling us that where exactly that device is located, and over here with the MAC address we are actually finding that what's the name of that particular machine, right? That is the MAC address. Now over here the concept is that whenever we are talking about URI, we are talking about both the things. We are talking about name and address. Now there is lots of confusion between URL and URN. So this L is uniform resource, and you know that it is locator. So when we talk about uniform resource locator, this means what? That this means that this is talking about only the address. And say when we talk about say URN, you must have guessed that this is uniform resource name. That's right, name. So obviously it will be taking care of only the name. So does it mean that when we say that URI, uniform resource identifier, so it holds URL and URN, right? Because this is for location, that means this is for address, and this is for name. Yes, you are right. That's how this thing goes. And this URI, when we are using this URI with HTTP, this is what is used to specify resources. So that's the thing, that whenever those APIs they were communicating, they were giving a very unique URIs for every variable so that they can easily be searched, right? It is like you are specifying everything very clearly, that where exactly, how to locate, how to reach to that. So that's what was in API, because it was nothing but it was like set of we should say resources, right? It is like set of resources because every variable is like a resource, and then for each resource you have attached a URI. So thus you are defining it very specifically. Now when you do this thing, when you say make all these resources variables and then you give URIs to them, all those API creators, right? API creators, what they do is they document this thing, and that's what is called as the API documentation. So in API documentation, they write in detail about resources plus URI for each resource. So it is like a combination of resource plus associated URI. So that's in simple words that what exactly is API documentation. Say one example is something like say HTTPS : let's say this is just an example, so dnac dot say example.com, right, example.com. This will make us understanding that what exactly is host name, what is address, what is path, what is resource, right? And then we say something for say our digital network architecture, and then we say it is the intent based network, and let's say we are dealing with its API, let's say version 2, and then we are talking about some network device, right? This is something which we wrote. Now let's break this thing. This HTTP, this would be the protocol, right? HTTPS, that would be the protocol. Everything from this double slash to single slash, first one, this piece, this is called as the host name, the address, and rest of this is called as the resource. This is called as the resource, or you can also call it like a path, right? Path or resource. This entire thing is the URI structure. URI structure. So that's what is called as the URI, Uniform Resource Identifier. Now if you see output of any of the REST API, right? Output of REST API call. Now, though we are not into programming, but when you will see this thing, you'll find that it is like a very simple thing, the way humans speak. Yes, that's the speciality of all these say REST APIs. So when it is like we are telling that output of REST API call, so obviously it would be like a response. So this would be like a say a response, right? And then this colon and this curly bracket, and if you see, then it would say like say type, and over here this is say Cisco Catalyst say 9300 switch. Then let's say MAC address, and there would be some MAC address. Similarly over here, let's say management address, right? Management address, and there would be some management address, let's say 10.1.1.1, right? So that's how this entire piece of information, it goes in such a way that even if you are not in programming, but still you understand it, that yes, it is like so human, right? We talk about now JSON. It is Java script object notification. Java script object notification. All those things, they are again on the same principles, that just by the looks, network administrator should be able to understand that what it is talking about. No extremely cryptic language. The language is such that it is very easy to understand. Not only that, it is like it will you will be able to extract the meaning very easily. And one of the example is like Postman. This is one of the app in API developer tools. This Postman, this is one of the app. Now what it does is, say this is API call. This is what this app would do, and whatever the response is from that API, it will save those details, and those details, they can be shared to another API, shared to other API, right? That's why, see the name itself, Postman, right? It is taking the information from one point to another point. Postman, very specifically. So this is for like API developer tools. The next topic is like data serialization. All these concepts recently Cisco has added into its new exam. So what they say is that though you are a network administrator, but this much foundation is very vital for future network automations. Now for the data serialization, let's say there are so many languages, right? There are so many languages and people are working on this network automation since quite a long time. But it would be much better when we write anything in the easy to follow way. So any of the language we pick up, basically it is like we are dealing with all those variables, right? We are dealing with variables, and these variables, where they are written in the form of text, and that's what would be flowing between, say, server and client. Server is someone who is serving, who is giving, and client is something who is receiving. So we might feel it like, let's say this is 1, this is 2, right? We have got a REST server over here, and we have got a REST client over here, and we say that yes, both of them, they are communicating. And what are they doing? Oh, they are sending those variables and data structure. That's what they are sending to each other, and fine, they must be talking with each other conveniently. But what if over here we have Java, and over here it is like Python? One is speaking English, second one is speaking French. Now there would be trouble. Things, they don't go exactly like this, right? There has to be someone. Now even our simple logic also tells that nothing more is to be done. If things are really like this, all we need is, we need a converter, right? We need a translator. If there is a problem that they can't talk with each other because of the language communication problem, so obviously will require someone, that is what is called as the converter. So simple. But so that is what is needed. So whole picture then would change. The picture would be like that over here. So that's your REST server, and let's say it is sending some JSON strings, right? JSON strings means it is sending all those variables, but over here there has to be a JSON converter. And if that is there, So then it would convert it into its own language, and same variables, they can be used, right? So the variables which were over here, they can be used. This thing is called as the data serialization language. This is what is called as the data serialization. This is just a name which is given, right? Data serialization. It is also called as the data modeling. Data modeling. Practically, they both mean the same. Now for such there are two languages. One is JSON and second is XML. They are classically for this data serialization. There is something called as YAML also, but right now forget about it. We'll talk about it right after we discuss this JSON and XML. After that we'll talk about it. So right now don't worry about YML. So in case of JSON, this is very similar to what is called as a very good link between human and machine readability. This is a very good thing. So if we want to go into more detail, so we can get that thing at www.json.org. But JSON is something which is a combination, or it is like a bridge between the way humans read and the way machine reads. We'll see an example. So this is one. XML, which is worth discussing. Say HTML was used way back, right? HTML was used for all those websites creation, to create those HTML pages. HTML was in use. Now this HTML was giving static pages. Then things improved. There was demand for dynamic pages, and those dynamic pages were having several variables. Those values were changing, right? And more complex data structure was there. And there came the XML, extensible markup language. No doubt. For our purpose, say, as we said that XML is there and we have got the JSON. They both are the languages, and definitely this JSON is more friendly. YAML, what I said is YAML. This is very interesting. YAML, what's the full form of YAML? The full form of YAML is YAML aren't, that means YAML isn't markup language. YAML. So this such things, they are called as the recursive name. Then you'll say that okay, then what is the full form of this YAML? The full form of YAML is YAML and markup language. Yeah, so that's the meaning. Okay, it's not a markup language, right? What it does is it focuses on data structure. Now in our Cisco exam, they ask you about differences of all of these things, and quite an interesting differences they are asked. So what we'll do is we'll make a small table to make things crystal clear. So it focuses on this data structure and it is easier to read. So it is easier to read. And the topic for tomorrow is Ansible, Puppet, right? All those topics. So this Ansible is what? Ansible is something which uses YAML. So this is just for the brief introduction of what exactly YAML is. In all these cases, whether we talk about JSON, whether we talk about YAML or even XML, all of these things, they are very easy to understand, and at the same time it is like a bridge between the way humans read and how these machines they read this. So let's say a comparison, let's say a simple comparison between what we learned between JSON, XML and YAML. So in case of say JSON, we say that it was for general data modeling, and still more important, we said that it is also used for serialization. With serialization, that means there was something like JSON converter. So that is used for REST API. When we are talking about XML, extensible markup language, it is for data modeling, but in this it is the markup language, right? It is what is called as the text markup language. So it will be for REST API plus web pages. So as we talked about that, it has got capability to give dynamic pages. And finally this YAML, again it is for say general data modeling. And where shall we be using it? Ansible. So now if you see, slowly and gradually things are fitting in their respective slots, that how these things they actually are implemented. Now as I said, that we'll be talking about interpreting JSON, right? So we'll write something very easy, but it would help you a lot, especially in exam if the question is asked about that what is the key value, where is the object, where is the JSON object, etc. So this will make things much easier. So this is interpreting, right? It is interpreting JSON. Let's start with something which we already know. We know that there is a key, and then there would be a colon, and then there would be a value, and this thing is called as the key value pair. All right, this is key value pair. Say example, say for example we say R1, that is like our router's name, right? And then we say colon, and with this we want to associate say gig 0/0, and as we want to associate more values, so we'll say gig 0/1, and we close it. So in this case, this is our key and this entire thing is our value. So far So good. We add some extra things to that. These square brackets, we said that this is also called as the array. True? So that's what is called as the array. Array means arrangement. In arrangement, when we want more number of values, so we'll call it array. So array would always be defined like this. Okay. We need to add just one more thing, the last and final, and that is object. Because we'll be creating several objects. So these objects would always be identified by these curly brackets. That's the only thing which we have to remember. So let's create something. I am drawing this curly. So this means this is a JSON object. Okay. And we say interface config. Right? Interface config. We are configuring some interface. Okay. And then again this curly. And in this I am adding, say, IP address colon and 10.1.1.1. That's fine, right? We add something more, say IP mask. Okay, IP mask, and again colon, and we give the mask 255, let's say 255.0. Done. Because we are dealing with, say, interface, so let's add one more thing. Let's say we want to go for the speed, right? Speed. So a specific number, and then we close this thing, and we close, we draw one more. Okay, we draw one more over here. Now let's interpret this. So easy. This is our key and this is our value. Again, this is key, this is value, this is key, this is value, right? So we have got key value pairs. This is easy to understand. But as we said that, let's go back. We said that objects, right? Objects. Anything which is between these curly brackets, this is object. So over here, watch for this. Here is right. So this one is the beginning, this one is the end. So that means this is an object, this is an object, right? And then this is also an object, this is also an object, as it is starting here and ending here. So this is also a JSON object. So here it is like object in object, right? This is object in object. This is what is called as the nested systems. This is what is called as the nested. So what nested was that when we are creating object in an object, so that's what is called as the nested system. Finally, there is one important, say, terminology which is many a times it is asked, that as we were writing everything, there were lots of spaces, right? There were lots of spaces in between. But because of those spaces, it was giving us good readability. Our readability was good. So this was good for humans because we find it easy to read. And that's why this thing is called as the beautified. It is called as the beautified, pretty, or the spaced scripts. And when it comes to computers, say computers say that we don't need that thing, so they will remove all those spaces. So everything would be written like one single line, right? Everything would be written like, say, one single line, one after the other. All those commands, they'll be written, so there won't be any spaces. And when there are no spaces, it is good for computers, right? It is good for computers, and that thing is called as the minified. It is called as the minified or the raw scripts. So that's what was for today. Tomorrow we'll be talking about Ansible, Puppet, and the implementation of what we learned, right? Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow.